Well, hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be working on the Fiesta, installing a new radiator, some ancillary hoses, power steering hoses, and a PCV hose. Now the very first step of the job is to have a look about taking this apart. To get access, I'll have to remove the mount tune inlet, go after the power steering hoses. Unfortunately you can see they're starting to weep fluid and it's making a right old mess inside the engine bay, so I'll need to clean that up as well. They've been on there for about 7 years or so nothing against JamSport for that at all. And I can see that that mount tune inlet is still showing a little bit of that surface corrosion, so I want to have a go at blasting that. I've got myself an air compressor, one of these blasting guns, and some bicarbonate of soda, so I'll give that a whirl. So the first step is to get the car jacked up in the air and to crack on with the job. Okay, we're at the stage now where I'm ready to take the inlet out, but I thought I'd just quickly talk you through the things that are needed to get access. It's not as tough as you think. You don't need to take the crash bar or the front bumper off or anything like that. There's plenty of space to manoeuvre with a few changes. Let's take a look. So once all the bolts are actually removed around the perimeter, the biggest challenge you've probably got is whether or not you leave your thermal gasket behind or you take it with you on the inlet, to be honest. I can see mine separated from the head, so I'm going to have to reseat that a bit later. It's not the end of the world, just clean it up with a Stanley blade or something along the edge and then re-seal it back onto the head. So to get access, I'm going after the bonnet latch. You take that off completely. There's 2 bolts to remove and a plug. I've labelled mine for later so I don't lose it as the bonnet latch. The vacuum hoses and everything just pull off, they're relatively easy. The hardest one is here for the brake vacuum line. What you probably want to do is to lift it up and then get a screwdriver in to just pop it out. There's kind of a two-way release mechanism on that. Next up, we need to move all the power steering hoses out of the way. Mine are already seeping fluid everywhere. They're quite old, they've been on there for about 7 years, so I'm not going to hold anything against JamSport for that. I bought a new set that I'll be fitting when I do the ancillary hoses as well. Next up, once you've released the bracket from the underside, the oil dipstick needs to come out. And under the car, we'll take a quick look. I'll bring the trusty lamp with me. You can see, once you've removed the fan, like so, you've got plenty of access underneath to be able to get in and deal with everything that you need to do. And it should be just a case of wriggling that bad boy forward now and releasing it from its cage. And the final thing just to check you've removed is the you can see here the map sensor. So once that's out of the way, we're good to go. I think the plan then is, I'm going to try it one-handed, to just pull it out to the side and away from the head. So you can see here, this comes along. Give it a little bit of a wiggle. It might start to catch on a few hoses below, but there we go. One-handed, I have an inlet out of the car, all ready for vapour or soda blasting tomorrow. I'll make that look nice and shiny and new. And then I've got lovely access to do all the ancillary hoses. You can see there's quite a lot of the RTV sealer left on the head. So what I will do is try and remove that as best as I can. It looks like it's coming away quite nicely with a bit of a peel. So I might not even need to take a blade to this, to be honest, but I'll get that cleaned up. The next stage will be getting that thermal inlet gasket reseated with some fresh RTV. Positioning the bolts around the perimeter just helps to keep it aligned and just to make sure there's not too much sealant getting in the way of the flow into the engine. So having a look down into the cylinder head, you can see these valves are open on the inlet side. Moving along, it's probably the first time I've actually bothered to look at the valves on this. For an engine that's done about 70,000 miles, it's looking pretty nicely polished. Nothing like the state of some of those gasoline direct injection engines where you don't get the fuel washing over the ports. Those valves are looking pretty decent. And I see inside the actual cylinder. Hello cylinder. Not bad for an old girl. So I can't say there's many people that have had a chance to look inside the cylinder head. It's the first time I've ever done it, funnily enough. So you've come with me on the journey, you lucky viewers and subscribers out there. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It makes a big difference to the channel and the way the YouTube algorithm picks up my videos. So I'd really appreciate it if you would. So the razor blade making light work of the RTV sealer around the head. I'm also going to go along and give that a little bit of a scuff with some Scotch-Brite, so I've got a nice surface to seal onto.
Now, taking off the evil PCV hose, these are known to split frequently and the valves are quite unreliable, so that can go in the bin. Great success.
Okay, it's jigsaw puzzle time, and I think I've worked out a potential solution, but there are literally, I don't know, pipes absolutely everywhere in the engine bay, and I'm trying to work out where everything's going. I'll talk you through it. Okay, let's start with the easy one. So there's one that runs around the front of the engine, I guess past the PCV valve, and it pops into a hole over there. So that first blue one, the long one, you see there. We then have the PCV, which is easy enough, so that will go onto here, and that pops down onto the bottom of the inlet manifold from the orange part down to that. Over here, we have the thermostat housing and this kind of T-junction at the front. So I bodged a little coupler, but I've got a nice piece now that should fit that a bit better. So we have one coupler that sits there. We have the piece that then tees off from that and runs across and down and into pretty much the guts of the oil cooler kind of area down the bottom. On this side we have two hoses up the top. This one looks like it's disappearing into the heater matrix inside. That looks like it's returning, and it's going all the way back down to where the oil cooler is in the centre of the car. So I'm guessing that's what makes your heating system nice and warm. Over on this side we've got the main sort of coolant feed, if you will, coming from the bottom of the tank. So it looks to be feeding right in the corner behind the headlight. So I have to get some light on that so you can see. But there's basically a pipe right in there. This bad boy goes on there and it comes onto that T-junction, which is down at the front. Last but not least, I've got two thinner jobs, and they look like they pick up directly on the two fittings you see on the lower part of the header tank. Now I'm not sure if I want to leave these quick release connectors on and basically just trim the hose off and fit these over the top and then clamp onto those, because they look like they've got a nice ridge. So that could potentially be quite good for retaining those on there. But looking at the internal diameter, they ain't massive. So I think they might have to go over the end piece. They probably won't go over the tang that's on the tank itself. I may be surprised, but you know, these are pretty chunky. Look at the size of that. So that's probably a 6mm diameter and 6mm thickness all the way around. So feeding that in over here is going to be interesting. I know these are very easy to crack. I don't even want to try, but if I squeeze it and pull it off, what's it like underneath? Oh, hello. Actually, you know what? Mr. Pipey McPipeface, I reckon you're going to go straight on there. Yeah, with a Jubilee clip over the top. Well, that's that mystery solved. Okay, now I'm going to have to empty the coolant out from this, I think, beforehand. So, looks like I've got a messy job ahead of me. But before I get to that, I think I'm going to get the inlet blasted and cleaned up when I've got a bit of daylight. The head's all nice and clean on this side now. I've gone over it with a light scotch and a degrease, so that is all ready for bonding the thermal inlet gasket onto once I've retrieved it from the mount tune inlet. So down here I've got to get this bad boy off and cleaned up, ready to, well, I've done a very good job of sealing that onto the back of the inlet manifold. Cleans up easily enough. I can hear a load of stuff leaking under the car. Oh dear, I've got me a coolant leak. It's all coming out of that pipe I just unplugged. Oh, I'm going to have to go and deal with that. Ay caramba, look at that, I've managed to get it all over this. It's dripped probably down, no my luck, all over the belts and then down onto the floor under the car. Let's go and have a little look at the damage. It's not too bad, only a few drops. As if that wasn't enough blue stuff in the engine bay, over here I've got some more. So these are the high pressure and return lines to the power steering pump, which is here. If you're a Fiesta guy, you know these things get very noisy and they need regular fluid changes if you keep the reservoir here. I've done the relocation which runs those hoses all the way over to where the battery box is, and that's my new power steering reservoir. I've had no issues with that boiling over on track days or in fast road use. With the old one, I used to have a mess to deal with in the engine bay. These have seen better days. They've started weeping, and it's starting to get on the trunking and all the pipe inside the bay. So if I move some of these lovelies out the way, you can see just the general detritus that seems to get all over it. So I need to get on the case and give this a little degrease at the same time. It's a big job, but it's one of those that you can kind of do with an evening or two, hiding in the garage, away from the realities of life and just enjoying yourself with some spanners. And I do like blue pipes, so this is going to look fantastic when it's done. I better get it to a car show pretty soon. Maybe we'll target something in the spring. I'll try and get it along to an event.
So let's start giving this a bit of soda blasting. I plugged it straight into my air compressor. It's getting somewhere between 80 and 90 psi, and I'm giving it a jiggle to make sure it's continually fed with the blast media. In this case it's a baking soda, so this is something that can be washed off later. You can see it's starting to brighten the surface if you really focus it in close, but I'm not sure this is going to give me that 100% finish that I really want. So hitting it with a trusty Dyson to lift all the baking soda off the driveway. Fortunately it's a dry day and this has made light work of it.
Well, disappointingly, the soda blaster hasn't quite worked the way I would have liked. But I'm trying plan B, so a bit of manual labour is always an interesting approach. So Scotch Brite pad, the red one, a bit of auto sol metal polish. See, I'm starting to get a slightly smoother finish on it. There's still some tarnishing once you do dry it off, but I think it looks a little bit more reflective after it's had a good rub over with this kind of circular motion. I'm trying not to put lots of scratch marks in it, so by using that circular motion and randomising the direction a little bit here and there, I'm hoping that it looks a bit more natural, and I'm not looking for that sort of perfect mirror finish or anything like that, just to be just a little bit brighter, a little bit more reflective under the bonnet. So once it's got a little coat of oil on it, the hope is that smoother surface will be a little less porous, so the oil will still sit in the recesses but it won't collect dirt as badly. And I've also been along and kind of brushed the Mountune logo, so when that's done, because it's a completely flat surface, you might end up with that kind of nice brush look.
So taking off as much of that polish as possible using the pressure washer outside to get this back to nice clean metal. And working in a fine coat of GT85 with some Scotch Brite, again trying to lift any of that tarnishing from the metal. Gently moving that around in circles. I'm not looking to damage it, I just want to lift off as much of that tarnishing as possible. The next step is then cleaning up the inlet thermal gasket, so this goes between the inlet manifold and the head to help reduce the, I suppose it's conductive heat transfer between the aluminium head and the inlet. And now popping off the lower rad hose and escaping the coolant. It's not in bad nick, I've probably only done it a couple of years ago when I replaced the thermostat last. The stage we're at now, moved the power steering fluid reservoir, and I'm starting to install some of those new hoses on. It's a bit of a maze to work out where everything goes, but I've managed to use a Stanley knife to free up some of the hoses that were really stuck on and I couldn't remove, so top tip.
Okay dudes, it's a toasty 6 degrees outside, but it's the warmest it's been for a few days, so I've had a good crack at this for a few hours this afternoon. Let's take a look. So I've managed to get the main hoses coming from the heater matrix in. I've also got the kind of vacuum hose coming from the top of the reservoir over here. That's installed, and believe me, they fought me every step of the way to get those pipes out. This one was particularly bad, so this is the one that goes from the top of the reservoir all the way around to the back of the that manifold on the side of the engine, and that was probably half an hour to get that one out. No visibility, no access, but as with most things, it's looking pretty good now. I'm happy. I've just got to get in and torque those up. Click, click, and nearly there. And then we're moving on to the power steering. So I've got the reservoir off the car, it's down here with the old hoses. I'm going to replace that in a moment. It's basically just a mixture of exciting fluids. I've got brake fluid there, power steering fluid there. Because I'm a muppet, I managed to spill a load of stuff all over the floor, so I'm going to have to get the mop out again. Oh, it's a messy one. Okay, another kind of hour and a half slog, and I think we've got the ancillary hoses all sorted out. I've just got the power steering put back in. Let's take a whistle-stop tour. So let's talk about some of the problem points. We had the two heater matrix hoses coming down here. The bit that was really hard, and is in fact really hard to see now even, is in here. you've got a vacuum hose and you've got a water hose going together into the same point. That all gets pulled all the way around the front, and then you have to tack it back up into here. There's two of those vacuum hoses coming around. This is quite a tight fit. I'm not entirely happy with how tight it is. It would have been nice to have had another, I'm not entirely happy with how tight this is. It would have been nice to have had another, I don't know, inch, 2 inches on the end. Haven't heard that before. But yeah, we've given this a bit of a looser fit. Managed to get that on, no problems. Nothing's touching where it shouldn't be. The bit down here was quite hard to free up. The bits on the oil cooler, obviously the oil gets pretty damn hot. They're almost welding themselves onto the pipe, so I had to chisel them away a little bit with a craft knife to cut the pipe, and then to pry them apart with a screwdriver. But there we go. So the next step will be fitting this. Then I can put the thermal inlet gasket back onto the front. Once that's then cured, probably leave it overnight to do so, I can then put the inlet manifold back on. Got all my bits and bobs on the floor ready to go over here. So that is a much cleaner, much tidier looking inlet manifold.
So in working on the car, I unfortunately managed to damage the air conditioning condenser, so I've got myself a shiny new black one, and I need to give the place a jolly good clean up. And voila, all ready for the reinstall back onto the car. So hopefully that's the last of the old parts coming off, and it really is just installation from here on out. And I'm ready to install that lovely air conditioning condenser. You'll see that in front of the rad on these Fiesta STs. So by getting a black one, I've lucked out. So the next step is to try and get all the radiator fittings in place, and those big 24mm screw-in fittings underneath need tightening up. And then that horrible push-fit connector onto the top of the rad, followed by the radiator hose and a Jubilee clip. Now I'm getting ready to install the inlet manifold. I've put a little bit of RTV sealer gasket maker type stuff into a syringe, and I'm gently icing it onto the back face so that it doesn't exude too much when it's pressed, but it provides a nice sealing surface. So a couple of blobs in between to act like glue, but those rings around the outside are exactly what's needed to make that nice seal between the inlet and the thermal gasket. So next step is to whip out the bolts holding the inlet thermal gasket. The next step is to whip out those bolts and get ready for installation. Now I've got to be super careful because I've got wet sealant on here. What I've tried to do is to fit the PCV hose onto the inlet before fitting it onto the car, so all I have to do is translate that into place. You can see there, tighten up the Jubilee clip onto the valve. So that's now pretty much bolted into place. I haven't fully torqued it all up yet, as I'm feeding in the bolts on the lower surface, so you get quite good access to that. It's literally the work of half an hour to get that reinstalled on the car. Pushing in the vac line there for the brake servo. Important to make sure that is well secured, and connecting up all the other ancillaries. So the Mountune cold air intake is now being fitted on, connecting that up to the crankcase breather at the top. And reinstalling the bonnet latch. I've given that a nice clean. It seems to be a bit of a grit trap, but I've greased it up and cleaned it so it's all ready to go. And she's looking pretty tidy. I'm very happy with that. Now it's into the finer details, and as they always say, the devil is in the details, and this is where you can really spend the time. I wanted to make sure those new silicone hoses are well clear of any moving parts, so I'll be tie wrapping them up and out of the way of the fan. So that's the first step, making use of that lower lug on the inlet manifold. And now a first start, having flushed out all the coolant and the power steering. horrible loud noises coming from the pump, and it looks like I've managed to aerate the power steering fluid, so I'll let that, I suppose, settle overnight, and I'll run it a few more times, bring it to temperature, and that should get rid of a lot of the air from the system. Now the headlight installation is a bit of a faff on these things, but the best thing to try and do is to twist and almost rotate that into place. As long as you've got it past the lower part of the bumper, you're good to go. And there she is, ready to come off the axle stands. So back on the floor, make sure you torque up your wheel nuts. And I need to move the Julia out of the way so I can get the Fiesta out of the garage and take it for a test drive. Whoa, what a beast. Now just about to get the old girl started up, and you might notice a bit of a check engine light on the lower left hand side. It's my fault, I switched the ignition on with none of the stuff plugged into the engine, so it got confused. All cleared after a couple of ignition on-offs. So engine's not leaking, nothing seems to be rubbing, it's all been brought up to temperature after a test drive, and I can't see any fluids on the ground underneath. So thank you very much guys for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, but for now, Engineer out.